whether it was childhood rejection from peers or family, or rejection in your adult life, maybe from coworkers, romantic interest, I mean, you name it. I know that many of you have been trying your hardest to get over it, but just can't. I hear your stories. I get your messages. Some of you have tried only scientific things, psychological things. Some of you have tried only spiritual things. But in the rest of this message, I'm going to expose that the roots of rejection include both, which is why healing those roots includes a strategy that addresses both. Okay, where do I get the idea that pain and fear of rejection includes both spiritual and scientific roots? Really, it's from how Scripture reveals that God made us. To understand the spiritual root, we have to go back to the beginning, back to Genesis. After all the plants and the animals were made, God put His hand to people. First, He made man and named him Adam. And we know that Adam was made in the afternoon because it was just before Eve. That's a joke, by the way. Some of you will get that later, but that's a joke. God made Adam, but then the Lord quickly realized that nothing in nature would provide a satisfying companion to Adam. A banana wouldn't do it, an animal wouldn't do it. He needed someone who could speak his language and understand his experience. So that's where in Genesis 2:18, God says, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him." That's when Eve came. When Eve was formed, Adam resonated so much with another being like him that he exclaimed, "At last, bone from my bone and flesh from my flesh." So obviously we see by Adam's "at last" expression that something wasn't satisfied in him until he had a relationship with another person. Now, this isn't a verse about marriage, so single people, you don't have to feel incomplete. Ultimately, this is a verse about how we were designed for human connection. God wired us for belonging. So here's the gist of how this relates to rejection. When we experience rejection, it's painful and detrimental to us because we feel out of God's created order. Like anything that doesn't get what it needs, maybe it doesn't grow correctly, or part of it dies, or it's just less efficient. That's how we are, whether we like it or not, when we don't get the human connection that we are created for. Yes, spiritually, God is all sufficient for us. Our acceptance is in Him. But He didn't just make us for Him, He made us to be in relationship with other people. So when we don't feel we get that, that's where we feel off because we're out of the created order. That's the spiritual side of it, kind of in a broad sense. But here's the scientific or psychological root. And again, as I said, it comes down to how God designed us. What we've discovered, or what scientists have discovered by studying God's design of the mind, is that the brain is moldable. It's called plasticity. Think plastic. Some people have more plastic brains than others, I've discovered, but plasticity means moldable, like plastic is moldable. Okay, that's what I mean by that. The younger we are, the more moldable it is. That's why we learn languages and instruments a whole lot easier when we're younger. Think about this. If you were born into an English-speaking family, you didn't choose to learn English, did you? Did you ever wake up one day when you were young and say, "I think I'm going to start learning English," if that's your first language at least? No. You naturally learned, at least the basics of it, before you ever had a textbook. You naturally learned through your environment. Well, what you learned as a child became so much a part of you, so much a part of your environment, that it shaped your brain that you can't unlearn it. I mean, think about that. What would happen if you tried to forget your first language? Could you do it? Where would you begin? This is the result of how environment and experiences shape the brain, especially in childhood. So what we've learned here is that there's a certain section of the brain that becomes activated when you feel physical pain. That's what science has discovered as well. And again, that's God's design to stimulate feelings that cause us to stop or leave whatever's hurting us. It's a good design meant to protect us. But the enemy now capitalizes on it in our fallen world, because science has also discovered that this area of the brain that produces pain is the same area that's activated when you experience rejection. Are you tracking with me here? When you get rejected, your brain responds as if it just experienced physical pain that you need to run from. Add this to the moldable quality of your brain, and maybe you can begin to understand why a fear of rejection is eventually created. When you experience rejection occasionally, you feel that pain. It's a natural response. But when it happens over and over and over, it's like learning that language as a child. It shapes your brain so that anything you see, hear, think, or experience, or is even similar to what caused you pain before, your brain says, run from that. Don't go anywhere near that. So we see rejection has both spiritual and scientific roots. Let me ask you, how would your life change if memories of past rejection no longer hurt? What could you do if you weren't afraid of being rejected in the future? Maybe you think it's not possible. I've dealt with this for so long. But I'm here to tell you it is. If you've read any of my books or heard me speak, you know that the pain and fear of rejection ruled my life for so long. But I found real healing and freedom, and you can too. That's why I created my e-course, Rejecting Rejection. In it, I hold your hand to explore the scientific, psychological, and spiritual roots of your fear of rejection. I show you methods to reprogram your brain to be confident and courageous. We go through spiritual insights, reflections, and applications to heal your rejection-related wounds. And there's so much more. So what do you say? Are you ready to be unshackled from the fear of rejection? Then join me now. Visit rejectioncourse.com to get started.